This is an idea that we had, I don't even remember when it first came up, but I think we were having a College of Business faculty meeting or some sort of a College of Business meeting, and we were brainstorming ideas. And one of the ideas that came forward was just this thought of having a series, an ongoing series, maybe once a semester or once a year. We would have these TED Talk-like Biz Talks. When we talk about the distinctive that the College of Business has here at Lipscomb, we feel like that distinctive has to do with integrity, work ethic. We feel like we're known in the Nashville community for producing students of high character and high integrity, and we feel like that's our distinctive advantage in the workplace, both in this area and in the world. That's what we're trying to do. That's who we're trying to produce, and that's probably a big draw for why a lot of you decided to come get your degrees here at Lipscomb. So thinking along that line and thinking about how this is a distinctive for us, we had this idea of TED Talks. We all love TED Talks. I use them all the time in my classes, and we can learn so much great content and learn a lot about presentation skills by watching great TED Talks. So we thought, why can't we do this? And at the beginning of the school year, I put it out to my students, and I said, anybody want to help me dream this dream and try to make it a reality? And so I had a team of students who did, who were willing to do that. So they've passed out these index cards, and we're asking you if you have ideas for future TED Talks, great topics, great speaker ideas, any input that you want to give us to try to make this an ongoing series and to do it well. We're inviting your feedback, and we passed the cards out early, not so that you could be distracted in writing, doing other things while we're talking, but so that if you have ideas while we're talking, you would have that and know why we had handed you that index card. Okay? Any questions about that? I'll treat this like class. Okay. So I do want to welcome you again. My name is Leanne Smith. I teach the business communication classes. We're so grateful that you have come today. I'm very proud of my students for putting this together. And the students selected, they decided who our lineup would be. And they're going to introduce everybody, but know that Joe Ivy was chosen as a faculty member, and one of the teams that is presenting today was chosen from the 7 teams that presented in business communication class this semester as having the most outstanding presentation. And all of these are going to be addressing the intersection of business integrity and zeal. So students, if y'all want to come on up, this is the time to do that.
Deuteronomy 8:18 says, "Remember that the Lord your God gives you the strength to make a living." Business matters, and profit isn't bad, but we are charged to be good stewards biblically.
Psalm 78:72. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart. With skillful hands he led them. So it takes more skill to succeed in business. David is a great example for us today. We must never forget the source of our skills.
We owe it to God to use our skills with integrity so that we bring him honor, so that we can prove faithful with those things he's given us. Profits are like oxygen. You need it to survive. But ultimately what matters is passion, growth, and a higher purpose. Tony Heesh, CEO of Zappos.com.
For in the end, it is impossible to have a great life unless it is a meaningful life. And it is very difficult to have a meaningful life without meaningful work. Jim Collins, From Good to Great.
And I don't know if you recognize these, but these are all quotes and phrases written on our buildings. So we went around and gathered some of those up and wanted to share them with you today. And now students are going to introduce our first speaker.
Greg Kirby is our first speaker today, and Greg is a youth minister for Woodbine Family Church here in Nashville, and he's also the winner of the 2013 Full Scholarship in Lipscomb's Degree of Difference video contest.
We are honored to have Craig Kirby now share his thoughts today on the intersection of business, integrity, and zeal.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's good to be with you. As the video said, I've been in youth ministry for the last 10 years, so this is a little out of my comfort zone to be speaking to business majors, people involved in business, because most people assume youth ministers get into youth ministry because they don't want a real job, and that's kind of true, but I found that the youth ministers that stay in youth ministry, that's not why they got into youth ministry. It's not why I got into youth ministry. I got into youth ministry because I wanted to make a big difference. And I felt that getting involved in the lives of young people, giving them mentors, giving them spiritual guidance, helping them to really understand who Christ is, was the best way to make a difference. And over 10 years, I've been privileged to see generations shift and generations change, and one of the things that I absolutely love about this new generation is that you guys want to change the world. When I got into youth ministry back in the early 2000s, it's like any time, people have always wanted to make differences, but as each generation has come along, I've just seen more and more and more kids who really want to make a change and make a difference. And I believe that a lot of business majors out there are wanting to make a difference in whatever field they're getting into, whether it's healthcare, whether it's finance, whether it's whatever it is, they want to make a difference. And so as you go out to try to make a difference, what you may find is that sometimes what you want to make a difference in and what other people want to make a difference in may not necessarily go hand in hand. A couple years ago when my wife and I were moving back to Nashville, we contacted a realtor that was a friend of a friend, and we were talking to him about what we wanted a house. We told him, well, we'd like it to be kind of close to the city, but in a good school district, and we'd like 4 bedrooms, and we'd like to find this all for under $200,000. And our realtor, who was a super nice guy, he very politely smiled at us and said he'd do his best. But what he really meant was, this is not going to happen, because you cannot get all of these things that you want. None of these one things was bad, but just you can't get a house that expensive or at that price that's that close to the city, that's in a good school district and all these things. You have to make compromises. And in youth ministry, as I've said, one of my goals has always been to have a church that's friendly to the kids who don't understand church, to the kids who haven't been raised in church, and kids who have questions, and kids who think differently. I've always had a strong passion that those kids need a church, and it needs a church to be able to reach out and to embrace them. But some of the people who I've worked with over the years, and this isn't a bad thing, but their view of a church is they want a place that's safe. And they want a place that when kids come into church, they can have a break from the world, where they can have a sheltered environment. And that's not a bad thing, but sometimes those things butt heads. And sometimes that's going to happen to you in the business world, where your vision and somebody else's vision for your company or for your organization is not going to be bad, but it's going to butt heads. And as you start out and you're young, you usually don't get your way. And what I want to encourage you is to keep your integrity and fight for the things that matter to you. But I also want to encourage you to be business savvy and realize that you don't always get your way, and that sometimes you have to make compromises, and sometimes you have to find ways to make people within your organization content and happy with what you're doing, and to help them get their way sometimes. Because if not, if you forget why you got into what you're getting into, you're going to burn out. You're going to lose your zeal, and you're going to stop doing what it is that you feel like you were meant to do. And if you feel like you were put on this planet with the sole purpose of making money, without getting very preachy today, I would like to encourage you, find something else. Make your life about something more than that. Make your life about making a difference. And I believe that if you keep the integrity of your vision, keep the zeal for what you want to do, then I believe that you guys really can. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Doug Smith, is well known in Lipscomb and in Nashville. He's an HCA executive and founder of or investor in multiple companies, including Passport, Quorum Health Group, and Blue Coast Burrito. He also happens to be my grandfather.
So please welcome Doug Smith as he shares his thoughts on the intersection of business, integrity, and zeal.
Thank you very much. Professor Smith, where is she? Oh, thank you for the opportunity. And ladies and gentlemen, young men and young women, I'm looking around to see if a friend of mine is here that I want to embarrass if he's here. His name is Dan Proctor. Is Matthew here, his son? Well, good. Tell them that I told the story about Dan. This is a unique privilege, and I am not a TED Talk person. My speeches are long, dry, not much fun, and so I just warn you that ahead of time, but I will keep it within the time limit. The concept of business, integrity, and zest clearly are important to successful management and to people who are in business who want to be successful. Actually, at the moment, I think business is a lot easier than homemaking. My wife is home. She's not at home yet. She's in extended care with a broken hip. I've been doing housework. That is not fun. Laundry, dishes, sweeping, watering plants, things around the house and in the yard. That's real work. So I'm going to tell you about some career opportunities that really, if you get married and want to be a homemaker, don't take what I say seriously. That's more important. John has 8 brothers and sisters. There are 9 of them, and they're all outstanding people. And that is a major job to be the mom. But excluding homemaker, I've worked in many fields, including healthcare, management, retail services, investing, ranching, among other things. And we had a ranch in Texas. And I will share some of the lessons learned from each of these experiences. I've also had some mentors along the way. And I'm going to encourage you to select a mentor that has these biz qualities, because you can learn from people that have been out there doing things that you want to emulate and you consider to be valuable. But some of my mentors, my most important ones, have been teachers. So use those opportunities while you're here to talk to your teachers, ask them. I know they're busy. I know they've got to grade papers, but they also are very good at counseling. So ask them for help. And I can't resist telling this story about a man who emulates these biz qualities in a brief presentation. He is a person I admire because of the qualities. And I want to tell you the results of his company that he started. It recently sold for $850 million. Now, I understand what you're saying about not making money, but he gives his money away. He uses his money properly, and I think that's the difference. $800 million from a startup company that started about 20 years ago. He's the one that ought to be making the talk. Maybe next time, John. Dan's father was a Nashville radiologist, deceased now, and Dan wanted to help him to generate greater efficiency, greater revenue collection in his office. He was a radiology practitioner in town. And so Dan was the first provider in Tennessee to connect directly with Blue Cross Blue Shield through automated billing. But Dan didn't stop there. He also noticed that when patients came into his dad's place, they had to call Blue Cross or whatever the Aetna or whoever the insurance company was and wait on the line for 30 minutes or so to get the eligibility. So that was a very inefficient thing for his office, and he said, the internet ought to be used in healthcare too. It's being used in other places. Why isn't it being used here? Because this all could be automated. You could have in a doctor's office or in the hospital admitting office. You could have one monitor. You could go in and pick the insurance company, put the name in, and you've got the eligibility right off the bat. So it was a great idea. And Dan, being a smart engineer, that's his background, decided to get an MBA. And I encourage you to get an MBA. He got his at Owen because there are things you can learn. He learned how to do a good business plan. He learned a lot of other things besides that. But I was an investor in the company. I was chairman of it, but it was valued initially at $750,000. And Dan was off to the races. He was raising, but it took a lot of money. He had to raise a lot more money. So he had the humility and the integrity to select someone to be CEO who could help raise that money. So he picked Jim Lackey, and you may hear about him if you're in the Nashville business community. And Jim Lackey was successful in helping raise the money. And so that this purchase I told you about, I don't know what that is, Experion is the name of the company. It's a data and analytical tools manager, and they bought it for $850 million. But you don't see any swagger in Dan. He's not the boasting type, he's not the proud type. He has the humility that you look for, the integrity you look for. And this entirely consistent with your values. Recently, some interesting research. Someone was mentioning Jim Collins back in the back of the room earlier. In his book, Good to Great, he set out some research objectives. He was looking for certain performance criteria that was unique among the successful companies and successful executives. One thing he was not looking for, do you know what it was? We just talked about it in the back of the room. It was a humility. Because, you know, there was a concept years ago that the guy that comes in and, you know, pulls the door off the hinges, the tough guy, is the top executive. We've gone through a lot of generations of leadership, and I'm sure you've had some things you've read about leadership. But Jim Collins found that some of the greatest executives over a period of time, based on their company's performance, were executives that had humility. They gave credit where credit was due. They were humble in terms of the relationships with people. They were great about encouraging customers. And they did all these things as effective leaders. And I thought that was curious that he had not had that as one of his expected criteria. So from a startup that was generating 25 cents a click each time they used the computer to get this information, the company that was now named Passport had a very expensive row to hoe, if you will, because they had to raise enough money to pay for the sales process. It cost, when you fly to Durham, North Carolina to meet with Duke University Hospital and to put them on the system, the plane ticket would, well, maybe with Southwest it's cheaper, but it used to be like a couple of $1,000s flying there and back. And so that eats up at 25 cents per click, that eats up your revenue. And so it took a long time for this business to develop, and lots of money had to be raised. And it would have discouraged a group that didn't have the conviction of what they were trying to do and for the right reasons. So among the mentors I want to mention would be some that have been in my life. I could start with my mom. When I was 4 years old, I went with her to the beauty parlor in a little town, Ballinger, Texas, and I played outside in the sandbox while she went in to get her hair done. And I was having a wonderful time. She finished, she came back out. And as she came back out, I slipped a little red convertible car in my pocket that was in the sandbox. We got home, and she realized that I had this car and said, "Where'd you get this?" And I said, "It was at Miss Ruby's." And she said, "We're going back." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you're going to go back and tell her that you took it. It wasn't yours. That's wrong." Sometimes today, with children, we accept things that we should not necessarily accept, not just children. But I mean, it's a lot of trouble for a parent to do what she did. It could have been like, "I'll take it back tomorrow, I'll take it back some other time, or I'll buy it from her." Just brush it over. But she didn't brush it off. She taught me, and that was early in my childhood. I had many jobs. I had a job, paper route when I was 9. I worked in grocery stores. I delivered groceries. I worked in a men's clothing store. In fact, Jay Rogers, who is the head owner of this store, Rogers Menswear, was an example. He said, "You know what? I'd like for you to go with me to the market this year. I said, great, when can I go? We're going to Dallas in the fall. He said, we're going to be buying clothes for the spring. So we're going to be going there in sweaters and coats, but we're going to be looking at short sleeves. And so his point was, in every business, you have cycles, you have opportunities for paying a lot of attention to how you go about those. You have knowledge that needs to be understood. In hospitals, you need to know that January is flu season, usually. And in other businesses, any businesses, restaurants, cold weather is not good volume. But so his point was, not only do you dress the way you want people to think the clothes will look on them, but you also want to understand fashions. And so I don't know if fashions is an appropriate context, but it's a business that has legitimacy because it was a great business. Another mentor of mine was my minister, Ted Norton, in this little town, because he made us memorize Scripture. Some of you may have heard recently Terry Waite in the chapel here. Did he tell you about the time that he was, they let him out of his cell just long enough to go to the restroom? There was a gun on the window, and he'd been in solitary confinement all this time and locked up for all this time. He had a chance to break out. You know what he did? He took the gun and gave it to his guard because he had memorized all of these scriptures all of his life, and he knew, and when he was in a dark cell where he had nothing to read, he went over and over and over, and killing is wrong. So rather than risk doing this violation, he gave the gun up. Another person that I learned from was one of my accounting professors, Overton Faubus in Abilene Christian University. He was a great gentleman with a Stetson LBJ. Are any of you old enough to know what kind of hat LBJ wore? No. Anyway, it wasn't the 6-inch, it wasn't a 4-inch brim, it was just a 2-inch brim. But Dr. Faubus was a wonderful man. Two little lessons. Government can't give you anything that they don't take away from you, which tilted me toward the conservative side politically, because I think that there's so much truth to the fact that we are outspending our resources in this country that I think that was good advice. And it's good advice for a business, obviously. The bank's not going to go along with you very long. He also said, hire honest people and then check on them. Another job I had out of college was a bank examiner. I was an assistant examiner for the Federal Reserve Bank in the 11th District. And sometimes you go in to verify the assets and you count the cash and the cash drawer is short. Sometimes even you have a mom who took some money out to buy some milk for the children. They were going to pay it back. They didn't pay it back. But those little things that we can do that are not right will weaken our resolve when we get to the big things. It's like cheating on your tax returns. There are other examples I should mention. Another mentor for me was a man named Ray E. Brown. He was professor of the health administration program at Duke, where I went for my master's degree. He said, good judgment is the child of wisdom. He talked about judgment a lot. He wrote a book about judgment in administration. One of the qualifications for someone who's in management is to be able to see, maybe beyond the written word. Maybe it teaches you. He felt like pragmatism was vitally important, and being able to see both the trees and the forest at times is necessary as you exercise judgment in an organization. Another inspiration for me was Dr. Thomas Frist, Sr. It's not that Tommy Frist Jr. is not an inspiration, but Tommy Frist Sr. was a physician who went with us in the management company to sell contracts. One time we were in New Hampshire in a little hospital. We were trying to convince them to come with HCA so that we could manage them. And Dr. Frist saw that the administrator was weakened and he couldn't pick up his briefcase. He said, go pick up his briefcase and carry it for him. I didn't think about that. He thought about that. His humility, his caring for people, his understanding of people's needs was an inspiration for his entire life. And he is a wonderful mentor. Even if you can't know him personally, there are books about him. Another person I want you to know about is Edwards Deming. How many of you have heard the name Edwards Deming? Quality improvement is one thing that I became convinced that we needed to do. You know, Dr. Deming went to Japan after the Second World War. How many of you drive Toyotas or Hondas or a Japanese-made car? One hands, half the class. Well, guess who helped make their quality what it became? This man taught quality improvement methodology. And they had someone named Ishikawa that taught the Ishikawa fishbone diagram, where you take a diagram and analyze, you know about this? And analyze it. This quality improvement, I don't know if there are courses here, I should know, but it's vitally important to an organization, understanding how to go about improving it. And Deming also had 14 principles that he taught. And one of them you'd be surprised about, because in an automobile assembly line, when someone pulls the cord, it stops the line, and you're down for whatever period of time it takes to correct a defect. And people were afraid their supervisors would fire them if they pulled the cord. Guess what Dr. Deming had as one of his 14 points? Drive out fear in the organization. Don't have people that are afraid to do the right thing. And that was another very important lesson. So I'm going to quit in a minute. Taking advantage of lifetimes of opportunities. If you have parents, some of us aren't blessed with parents that are as concerned as others, but it doesn't keep you from being that kind of a parent yourself. But the lessons about honesty, the lifetime of integrity, the resistance to temptations when you get out on your own. What do you think? Have any of you read the new book, Flash Boys, by Michael Lewis? If you have an opportunity to Google it and look up the short version of Michael Lewis's book, what it is about is high-frequency trading in the stock market. And I wonder if these guys that developed this felt any conscience, anything wrong with taking advantage of ordinary stock traders in the market by trading milliseconds before anyone else had the price data. They built these intricate systems between market centers, but New Jersey, where the data was originated, Chicago in some cases, where they could get the data and they could milliseconds ahead of others, and huge amounts of trading. But they took advantage of a system, and other people didn't have the same opportunities. I would hope that if you're that bright and able to develop systems like that, and if you're in the stock market trading business, I hope you would never consider something like that personally. Well, let me leave you with one final point that my minister taught me to. I memorized it in the King James, so I'm going to read a different, updated version of it. For I know the plans I have from you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you. And Romans 12:2 says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. And I wish you every success. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Joe Ivy, needs no introduction here. He's Professor of Management and Executive Director of our Entrepreneurship Center. He's also currently directing our graduate programs in the College of Business, and he formerly served as Senior Vice President of Advancement.
He's a favorite of students here in the College of Business and was voted by both graduates and undergraduates to speak here on this topic today. Please welcome Joe Ivy.
A few months ago, in fact, just a few weeks ago, my wife Melinda and I took our 3-year-old grandson to the first movie that we've ever taken him to. Big day in our lives. You know, we had the car seat in the back of the car. We had him loaded up in there. We were taking him into a movie. We asked him which one he wanted to see. It was the Lego movie. Now, I've played with Legos with both my kids and now with my grandkids, but the idea of sitting there for an hour and 20 minutes and looking at a bunch of Legos in a movie was just really more than I thought I could bear. But you know, when I sat down in the movie, I began to see that it was much like all the other good and evil kinds of shows. There were people who were fighting for the little guy, fighting for what was right, and there were people then that were trying to be who were the villains, trying to exploit them and make life miserable for them. And it went on, and Legos kind of fought, and they were fighting back and forth and trying to rebel, and everything was going, was just going really well, and the good guys in the movie won. The people with the white hats won. When I was walking out, my little 3-year-old grandson looked up to me and said, "Jojo, it's really nice when you can be old enough to finally have a name like that, like Jojo." He said, "Jojo, that Lego movie was weird." And I said, "Yeah, Murphy, it was weird." But I was thinking in my mind, I really thought the Lego movie was a shame. Because you see, the villain in that movie's name was Mr. Business. The person that was trying to exploit and control all of those others' name was Mr. Business. And so where Murphy left thinking that was weird because Legos were doing things that Legos ought not to do, I left very frustrated because it was showing business through the eye to the public and through the eyes of these producers as something that was bad. But as frustrated as I was, I think that movie raised 2 very important questions for me. The first question is exploitation and control the only way that we can zealously pursue business? And then the other question was, is there some way that I can live with integrity? Integrity, which is more than ethics, which is really the alignment of our lives with a higher calling. Can I live with integrity and still be successful in business? Suresh was remembering his early childhood. He remembered growing up on that farm, that hard-scrabble farm that was on the outskirts of a small village in India's northern district of Moga. He remembered that one old rib-showing buffalo cow that his parents had. He remembered the bare subsistence of most of his days. He remembered the many nights that he went to bed hungry. But today, as an adult, as he was remembering those things, he was standing on the street corner in that same village in Moga. And he looked there where in his childhood electricity and education and health care were just unheard of. He looked now, and on the street corner to his right, the next street corner, he saw the primary school. And looked a little farther down the road on his left, and there was the secondary school. And then he looked up above, and there was electricity going to every house in that village. And then he looked across the street and saw the medical clinic where physicians practiced on a routine basis. And then he looked down to the very edge of the village, and he saw the building that housed the organization that was responsible for all the improvement in that village. From going to bed hungry, he looked down and he began to see that building. As he was thinking back about his childhood, he remembered that he went to bed hungry, that they could barely get by, and now he thought about his own kids, and they weren't going to bed hungry. In fact, they were enjoying luxuries that were unheard of in his life. As he looked down at that building, he noticed that that building was not a government agency. That building did not house an NGO, nor did it house a charity. The building that housed the organization that made all the difference in this village, and in fact throughout the district of Moga, housed a Nestle dairy. You see, business made that difference. It was business that was able to bring in that kind of commerce. It was business that was, by commerce, was able to bring in that kind of societal improvement. You see, business doesn't have to be about exploitation and control. It can be about positive social change and positive societal benefit. Nestle started a couple of decades ago in Moga trying to put a dairy in place. And in order for that dairy to be functioning, they had to have a consistent supply of good milk. Well, when they got there, they found that people were just barely getting by. There was not a good supply of milk. So what Nestle decided to do was to begin to build the infrastructure to support the dairy that they wanted to have in Moga. And so they taught farmers how to raise feed crops so that their cows would have enough to eat, and therefore through that nutrition would be able to produce more milk. They brought veterinarians in, and they began to send them out to the farmers to raise the health of their cows, because about 75% of the calves in that region were dying. And so there was no way for those farmers to really get ahead and to build a herd that could supply the quantity of milk that Nestle needed to have in their factory. They began to realize, they realized that the farmers really didn't have a means to transport that milk safely from their small farms to the dairy itself. And so Nestle went out, and in each of the small villages in Moga, in a dozen small villages, Nestle went out and built small refrigerated dairies so the farmers could get their milk to that dairy and collect it and then transport it to the major manufacturing facility that Nestle had built. And in doing all of those things, in trying to be economically viable as a business, and the exercise of commerce, that region began to improve. When Nestle started down that journey, there were about 180 milk-producing farmers in that region. Today, there are over 75,000. When they started, there was not a dairy to be found in any of the little villages of Moga. Today, there are over 650. The per capita income in Moga is dramatically better than any of the districts around them. They have 5 times the number of healthcare doctors in their areas, all because of commerce. And today, what they really have is competition. Competition that has made Suresh's village dramatically different. And so what we begin to see in the story of Suresh is completely opposite of what we saw in the Lego story. Rather than building a business that exploits and controls, Suresh experienced the power of commerce, the power of economics to change the lives of people around him. Just like Suresh, Sue today is standing on the street corner of her town. And she's thinking over some job opportunities that she has. Some of you who are seniors are trying to think of the same kinds of things. And she's trying to decide, am I going to take that soulless job that basically pays the bills and gives me the resources so that outside of work I can pursue my passion of helping the world be a better place? Or is she going to continue to look to find a place where she can take her business skills and align that to actually produce something worthwhile? Jane is in that same town. She's about a mile down the road. She's a little bit older. She's sitting in an office building there about a mile down the street of that same town. And Jane is looking at this advertising proposal. And she's trying to decide, am I going to run this advertising campaign that basically exploits people to buy products they cannot afford? Or am I going to live with integrity? You see, it really is all about choosing. Mr. Business in the Lego movie chose to exploit and control. Nestle in Moga chose really for not necessarily for altruistic reasons, but for commercial and economic reasons. They chose to invest in a community, and that community prospered. Sue and Jane are having to make those same kinds of choices, because whether you choose to exploit and control, or whether you choose to use the power of economics to change the world around you, business is agnostic about those choices. Business can be used to either end. Business can be used to exploit and control. It can be used to make the world a better place. It's agnostic about how it's used as a tool. So that means it's within each of our abilities, it's within each of our choices, each of our control, to decide how we're going to use that tool. Are we going to use business only for our own good, only to get what we think is best for us? Or are we going to be able to take the skills that we're learning in business and apply them in a way where business can have the sustaining power of economics to make the world a better place? That's the choice that we face. That's not a choice that business as a discipline creates. That's a choice that we have to answer. So as we face that choice today, I hope that you will choose passion, pursuing the passions that you want to pursue in life. I hope that you'll choose integrity, the alignment of our lives and our actions to a higher calling. And then, if you make those two choices, I believe you can choose business as the tool to deliver on that passion and on that integrity. Thank you.
Anna Boone was a graduate assistant in the MBA program, I guess early when I first came and started teaching. And she impressed me so much. And then shortly after graduation, she recontacted me because I was had initiated a course called Mentorship. Some of you have been involved in that program. And she wanted to seek a mentor. And she's just always been such a sponge. She's such a lifelong learner. She has always impressed me so much. I'm really honored that she was able to come today. She's been good for others. She didn't just receive, but she's given back. You know, she never showed me one time and had response and let people job shadow her. And she's just a wonderful person. She's with Highland Consulting, North Highland Consulting. And we're very honored that you're here. Thank you. Thank you.
So I do have a couple slides. This is pretty casual and pretty easy. But I wanted to talk to you today about the value of developing a greater sense of self-awareness. And really what I see in that and the value in that is being able to know yourself well enough to come across as authentic. So I think this has got a great connection to the topic today. To be able to know yourself well, you're going to be able to succeed professionally in the business world. You're going to be able to live with greater integrity and sincerity in your life. When you know who you are and you know what you believe and you can be authentic, that's being real. That's sincerity. And then lastly, being able to pursue your work with zeal and passion. I think that when you know what it is that you believe, when you know who you are, you can really put all these things together. So 3 things I wanted to talk about today are self-awareness basics. This is going to not be news to most of you. Strategies for building deeper self-awareness. And then lastly, using self-awareness to grow and improve in your life and to become more authentic. So before I do this, I want to tell you a story about myself. So I'm going to tell on myself bad. And I'm going to tell you, first of all, that this journey towards self-awareness is one that I am not good at in many areas of my life. I'm learning it. I'm not perfect. And I'm going to go back to senior year of undergrad. And I went to a job fair. Do any of you recognize this scene? Thousands of undergrad students milling around, bad suits, good suits, no suits. I was one of them. And I was 21 years old, and I was living in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My number one criteria for getting a job was, I'm not staying one more winter in this godforsaken city or state. I can't do it. It's too cold here. So I was going around to all the booths, and I said, where are your operations, sir? So nice to meet you. Oh, thank you, Target. I'll move on. All right, Best Buy Corporate. Wow, I heard you have a huge operation. I'll talk to you later. Not that they wanted me, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the cold. So I finally got to a consulting company. I didn't know a lot about consulting. I'm a consultant now, ironically, all these years later. But I got to a consulting booth. Sounded like they did pretty cool work. And when I asked where they were located, they said, see if you can decode this answer, you can live anywhere with a major international airport. In other words, you live in a hotel, but I didn't put that together at that point. So at any rate, so I said, okay, well, nice to meet you. We kind of talked about the opportunity, and I left, gave them my resume, went on to the next thing, and about 15 or 20 minutes later, I got a call on my cell phone, and they wanted me to come over for an interview. And I went back, I was kind of excited, sounded like a good opportunity. I sat in that little booth behind the job fair, and I have to tell you, it was the worst interview of my life. I was situational-based interviewing. I didn't even know what that was. They were asking me tricky questions, and I just kept thinking in my mind, what do they want me to say? How am I supposed to answer this? What are they looking for? Who do they want me to be? What does a consultant do? And I answered every question from this position of trying to fit into the mold that they wanted for me, which is not always a bad thing in interviewing, but I was definitely on the wrong side of balance there. I was far on that side. So fast forward about 5-6 months, couple months after graduation, probably about 15 interviews later, I interviewed a lot. And I just wasn't getting it. It wasn't working. Every interview that I went to, maybe I was a little less worried about what they wanted and a little bit more interested in understanding what I wanted and was good at and how I could be real with them. But I just had this moment where I thought, this is exhausting. I can't find a job. I can't find a company who wants me, and it was hard. And I just thought, you know what? My next interview, forget it. I'm going to be so honest, but before I'm honest, I better figure out what it is I want. So I came to, I was in Nashville at the time, and I interviewed with a consulting firm here in town, and I asked them a few questions about the company, and then she asked me several questions, and at the end she said, tell me one of your top professional goals. I thought, here it comes. I've thought about this. I've done some self-awareness seeking, and I know what it is I want. And I said, I want to be so good at my job that when it comes time for me to be a mama, you can't live without me. And you'll cater to whatever I want in terms of a balance between my work and my life at home with a baby. So I don't have any kids yet, but I said that, and they hired me. So anyway, that's my story. So anyway, I want to kind of go back to these topics in our discussion today and talk to you for a few minutes about the basics of self-awareness. So you've heard this term, know thyself. I think that when we think about these are the things that we all kind of know and think about. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your blind spots? What are the things you don't even know that you don't know about yourself? In addition to that, which I consider this looking inwardly, kind of focusing internally, what do you believe? What are your passions? What are your values? What does that belief structure look like? That's very inward seeking. It takes quiet time. It might take a pen and a paper to write some of this down. Don't be afraid if you write it down and it changes. It's not a bad thing, but it's always a good exercise, and it takes some focus. I also like to think about evaluating outwardly as well. We don't live in the world all by ourselves. We live in the world where we're filled with other people and circumstances, things that trigger emotions in us, things that trigger behaviors in us. And we need to know what it is that causes us to react in certain ways. Somebody might remind you of somebody that you didn't like, and you might act a certain way. But it's good to know what those things are so that you catch them before you react as opposed to after. That's the goal. I'm still getting there. So I think that the other thing I wanted to talk about is kind of moving beyond the basics is strategies for deeper self-awareness. So a lot of you are familiar with personality inventory. Strengths Finder's a book out there. There's Myers-Briggs. We use something at my job called the HBDI. There's the DISC. There's probably 100 great personality inventories. I think that's a good place to start. I don't think that's the ending point. I think we can get stuck in a rut or stuck in a box of what our personality inventory says. At work, we'll say, HBDI is color-coded, right? So red, yellow, green, blue. Oh, that's just your red talking. Or it's like a cop-out for me. I'm just being yellow right now, so you're just going to have to be okay with it. And you want to know what? I'm more than yellow, and you're more than red. And we have to be able to understand the system and the structure that those different tools give us, the context for understanding others, the context for understanding ourselves, but go beyond that. So I think a personality inventory is a great thing. I think it just doesn't stop there. The other thing I wanted to talk about is using real experience, whether it's volunteer experience, a job, whether it's a project at school, to stop and take an inventory after each experience of what did I like about that and why? What did I hate about that? What made me not want to go to work about that job? Because everybody has to start somewhere. Everybody has a job when they first start out, or they have a volunteer before they even get that job. And you have to do things you don't like to do, but hopefully you can narrow and use self-awareness and authenticity, being honest with yourself about what makes you tick, what makes you so excited to go into work. That's this passion piece of what I wanted to talk about today. You want to be so excited. You want to be ready to get in your car and drive to work. So I think that using real life experience to hone in on what you're best at is a really good thing. So let's talk about, lastly, growing and improving. So let's just say you did a really good job and figured yourself out. And, this is who I am and what I'm about. But it never should stop there. We should always be on a quest to know who we are, but want to make ourselves better.